Okay, so Jim, why don't you give us a little bit of background on like who you are, where you're from, and then how you became involved, pardon me, in education within our community here.
Well, that's rather a lot. Okay, I am, first off, let it be known that I'm 85 years old almost. And so my experience with education spans World War II, Korea, Vietnam, on and on and on. It was a rather extensive involvement in my personal education. I hold 5 university degrees because I kept changing my mind as to what I wanted to do.
What did you start with?
Nuclear power.
Wow. Okay, I didn't realize that. I knew that it was in your sort of profile. I did not know that was your lofty original goal. But where did it go from there?
Well, you got to remember that in those days, the federal government threw money around at people who were pursuing advanced degrees in sciences. And so I had fellowships to study nuclear power, both here and in England. And the more I got into it, the more I decided I really didn't think that was the right way to go.
I am desperate to know what you transitioned to from nuclear power.
Well, you get to nuclear power in those days by doing electrical and mechanical engineering. So I had a degree in EE. I had a 1-year master's degree in British nuclear power. I then studied some direct energy conversion, not using the nuclear reactor. All of that was really great, but and I got, and this is my story. I got a summer fellowship for a nuclear power company in California, and there were some people from the brand new University of California at San Diego, professors who were doing summer work for this same company, and one of them told me some things about what was happening. It was one of the top 10 universities before a student ever walked in, just in terms of their faculty. So I applied, and I got in the physics department, having blessing little physics background. So I went through the physics program, not knowing very much still about physics.
That's okay. You were there to learn. I presume, and learn you did, I presume.
I did indeed. I think I was number 2 in the qualifying exams.
That doesn't surprise me in the least.
But, the thing that if you wanted more of the story, the thing that was unusual was that I had learned a couple of techniques, electron paramagnetic resonance, and which I was proficient at doing, and some things about optical as well. My research work turned out to be the identification of the primary photoreactant in bacterial photosynthesis.
Whoa. Talk about very niche.
You can see how my background in nuclear power and actually the electrical engineering came in very handy, and continued to. So at any rate, so I got this degree, and I got it in 1972, 70, and then I did a postdoc, so 72. Mm-hmm. And that's when Nixon and who was it, Gorbachev then? I've forgotten, signed this agreement where they ended the Cold War. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, there were no jobs. And what I had hoped to do.
Yep.
My professor got me a temporary position at the Bell Laboratories, mm-hmm. and I was about to be cast out to the wolves when another thing happened. The next shoe to hit was that they canceled the entire anti-ballistic missile program, for which AT&T, Western Electric, was a prime contractor.
Oh my goodness gracious!
Now, AT&T was unique in American companies in that it almost never fired anybody. You went to work, you had a job for life. Mm-hmm. And they struggled mightily to meet that. Mm-hmm. So you had the situation of phased array antenna experts designing power supplies and things like that. Mm-hmm. But in any event, I was still on the temporary status. And there was the Bell Labs had several locations, one of which was in my hometown, and my then resident town. Mm-hmm. And they were starting a new program. They needed somebody with a physics background. And that was the only way that they could get a replacement with this hiring freeze, was that they had something needed that they just couldn't meet in-house.
So this is very interesting, because when I graduated college in 2001 and with studying computer science, and not at all in the same sort of order of magnitude or any of the same circumstances that you just described, save for the fact that, you know, there was a push of all of this energy with students my age for the decade or long prior, saying, hey, look, if you're going to get into computers, like your future is made for you, right? And you could see the .com era like coming down the tracks like a speeding train, mm-hmm. right? And then, no joke, it all blew apart like just as I was graduating college. So some of the things you're saying, you know, maybe to a different scale, are they're very similar to what I experienced. Certainly what a lot of my friends experienced as we graduated college together, that there were no jobs to be had, you know, and people were taking jobs in other fields or you know, trying to leverage their education in other ways. It's very, very interesting that, you know, I think people recognize that happened, and you know, there've been similar stories about lawyers and other kinds of professions, you know, over the last 2 decades. But you can go back to the mid 70s or the early 70s, and you can even see kind of an instance of this based on sort of like geopolitical stuff dictating where the jobs are.
Further than that,
yeah.
I graduated with my EE degree in 1958.
Yep.
And that's the year that Eisenhower, I think it was, decided that we would conserve all of our energy by not using any, how did it work now? Use only foreign oil. And we would
only foreign oil.
and we would, all our oil would be held in reserve.
Okay. Yep.
Okay, that meant that everybody in the geology department, who were mainly people who worked for the oil companies, had no jobs.
Unless they wanted to contract over in the Middle East somewhere.
My cousin did. One of the guys was working in his uncle's furniture store, mm-hmm. but that was it. So yeah, this is a cycle that I don't know how to break. But in any event, the opportunities in the Bell Laboratories.
Mhm.
I was first doing some material work for this new technology, and being an electrical engineer, I thought, well, really, we ought to automate this. So I automated the test process, in which which involved a lot of samples and analysis of the results and so forth. And one day, this guy comes by, and he talks to me a bit about things and about computing and about power in general. And I said, okay, great. So we had a major disaster going on when one of our suppliers' parts started failing, and we had endless conference calls and trips and that sort of thing. So I was asked to go to my department head's office, which we were routinely doing for these endless conference calls. So I'll show up with my notebook, and he says, okay, there's a management job at this other location. It's yours if you want it. The director and the department head are in the room next door waiting for you. So what am I doing? I'm managing a group that designs power supplies.
Oh, it's a natural transition. Totally understandable.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes all those days running the nuclear reactor and that sort of thing.
So let's fast forward a little bit from there. So you were working with a group sort of designing power supplies. What year was that in that sort of transition?
That would have been 1972.
Okay.
I think. No, I'm sorry. 75.
And so were you living in this area then, or were you still?
No. I'd moved east to get the job with the Bell Laboratories. And we lived in New Jersey for a while, but we moved to Pennsylvania because I got transferred to Pennsylvania. I got transferred back to New Jersey. My wife looked at me and says, "Fine, you go. I'm not moving again."
Oh no. Pennsylvania's
so I had an 85-mile commute.
Yeah, depends on what part of Pennsylvania.
yeah. But in any event, yeah. So beginning in it would have been 79 or so that I got involved in the technology transfer to folks in Japan, and so spent a fair amount of time traveling back and forth. I got enough miles. I told my wife, I have enough miles that we can go anywhere in the world, business class.
Wow.
And she says, I said, "Where do you want to go?" She did not hesitate. China.
Wow.
So in 1988, we did a 3-week tour of points of interest in China.
So I have to ask, because we can sort of reflect. I mean, this interview is about education. We've reflected a little bit on your education, but this is kind of like a pivotal point to ask this question. Like, you visited some other countries in a completely different part of the world from here. And I know there's a lot of rhetoric and other things around the way other countries sort of educate their kids and that sort of thing. I don't know how much you were able to sort of observe while you were visiting, and granted, this was 2 to 3 decades ago, but I am curious sort of what you learned or what you observed while you were visiting both those countries, Japan and China.
Well, and even going back to England and France. I also worked in France.
Yeah.
In all of those countries, the education system, each one has its own particular foci, its own particular way of doing it. but there is a very strong emphasis on excellence in education.
Mm-hmm.
And for most countries, the cut is made around 11 or 12 years old.
Mm-hmm.
You have the 11 pluses, which are examinations that they take in England. And if you make up, you have to have certain scores on that. Even in Barbados, they have several high schools, and if they take the British 11 pluses, and depending on what grade you get is what high school you get to go to.
Yes. Yep.
So that is one of the main differences, is that you have a separation right up front, and you have focus on the advanced people.
Interesting. And that was that just a British sort of phenomenon, or was that something that
no,
was...
no. It just had different flavors in Japan and
Interesting.
and China. I didn't spend a lot of time in China on that, but I did have chatted with some people about it.
Mm-hmm.
I've had white hair for a long time, and one of the trips to China, the fellow arranging it, there's a kind of some rules about the way meetings are held there.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a person of a certain status on this side, there has to be a person of that same status on the other side, roughly. And I don't know what he told them, but the Chinese person that was my match was the retired minister of communications of the country.
Wow.
So
that is immediately flattering.
Well, I'm glad I never tried to buy a car from that guy. But the reason I raised that was he was part. Now he had a doctorate, which he'd gotten, I've forgotten where. But they were working hard to bring the level of their graduates up to U.S. or international standards.
Oh, that's wild.
And we were talking about the problems they had. The first time I went to China, there were guys over there from MIT and so forth. The Chinese are saying our universities need to be better. And the first thing that one of the guys told us is, look, each one is standing alone. As a matter of fact, each one is located with a factory, and the students had to work in the factory. He said, look, you people, the professors have to be able to talk to each other. Mm-hmm. and share things and try to get some consistencies into it. That's all new to them, but they did it, and they did it in spades.
Interesting. So this was still like the late 70s or maybe the early 80s at this point?
By that time, that conversation was held in 94.
94. Okay, right. So, and were you living up in this area then, or were you still down in the New Jersey area?
No. I was still there. I moved up here in 2002.
Okay, so 2002. So that transition, were you involved in any kind of like school board work or educational type stuff until you arrived here?
No. That was the reason I started this. As soon as I came, not school board, but I was on the planning board for 4 or 5 years.
Yep.
And the reason I did that is I had not been able to do anything, not even take my daughter to Indian Princess, because I was out. Mm-hmm. I had a friend that he had helped me wrestle a large air conditioner, and it came my turn to help him. And they call and says, could Jim come and help? And now he's in China. He's in Japan.
Did you say yes?
But so really when I came up here, my wife was assistant to the president at NEC.
Okay. Yeah.
And so she came up in the fall I kind of I mix up the numbers now, but anyway, she came up here and stayed here for a while. She rented a room for a while, and then in 2001 we bought a house, and then I came up in April of 2002.
Okay.
And was immediately shanghaied into a position as alternate on the planning board.
That's how it works here in town, actually.
I had made the mistake of attending a conference about things and saying something that one of the planning board members thought sounded pretty thoughtful, and so they
you know who'd be a good fit for planning board? This guy right here.
Anyway, so okay, I'm on the planning board. That was about 2002 that I was first alternate.
Yeah.
And I think I didn't run again in the elections for 2007. But
Right.
I was chair of the planning board. I was chair of the regional planning commission. I did all that stuff, and I reckoned that it was time to do some other things, and I talked to some knowledgeable people, and I said, well, you know, I want to continue to contribute to the community. They've been very good to us, and what elective position might be suitable. And the guy said, look, he was former superintendent whose name.
Okay, yeah. I know him too. Yeah, I had a friend who worked in the district here during that time period. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he and I used to sit at the little bar that they had in there in the pharmacy, the drugstore.
Yeah, like the old, the soda bar there or whatever it is.
Yeah. And we would sit there and we'd solve the world's problems and so forth.
I forgot that was there. That was it wasn't that long ago, but seriously, it's no longer there.
Yeah. But anyway, he said, you know, the school board, there's you've got a lot of support. You have a lot of people doing things and asking you what you think of them and that sort of thing. So I said, okay. So I ran to the school board, and the earliest I can see from the whatever piece of paper I have now, it was about 2007.
Okay.
It's when I the first oath I swore.
That's interesting. I don't think I was that much later than you then. I was like 09, maybe 2010, something like that. So at least up at John Stark. I don't know that I joined Henniker for a year or two after that. It was with after Teresa had left the board, and Arnie was still on the board there, and it was sort of in that time frame that I jumped on. But yeah, so that was interesting. So like that was right before, I think, sort of like the economic downturn here in this country anyway, the Great Recession as they call it, right? And so maybe, as you jumped on school board at that point, right? I think I've said this before, like there's a total learning curve to being a school board member and getting involved in local education, right? I think everybody's got a different entry point for this, right? So what was your entry point? Even if you were just asked to be on the school board, which so many people are, but like, what was your entry point to this? Like, what did you come to the equation with, and sort of what were you looking at as the past of education there?
I will be honest with you. I had and still have an ongoing concern about the level of education in American public schools.
Yeah.
I had been working with people in Europe and in Japan that were truly educated. Now, their social systems had a way of filtering that out, but even the we had some the nuclear reactor, we had some machinists and technicians and so forth. These are very knowledgeable people. They hadn't got to go to school and they hadn't got to go to university and so forth. But you know, I felt like that, and by that time, I had already put 2 kids through school. I had watched 2 kids go through school. As a matter of fact, had graduated from college already by then.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I had my and they were as different night and day. My son he was always kind of a spaced out kid. So one day we were talking about it. So I said, yeah, that happened in 1763, and so and so did it. He was a history and that kind of stuff buff.
Mm-hmm.
He went through every bit of math in the high school and got good grades in it. Went to college and swore on a stack of Bibles he would never take another math course. And he didn't.
I've got a kid like that at home right now.
But in any event, I felt that starting with the beginning, that U.S. education, now I was educated in Texas, starting with a 2-room country school. And we were considered to be rather up, we are actually taking standardized tests and doing things like that. And so I was able, although I almost, an interesting side note, I was put ahead in this 2-room country school twice. And so,
as in skipping grades, you mean essentially like the idea of skipping grades?
Which is a horrible thing. I would never wish that on anybody. But so I was fairly immature, and if I was interested in something, I would get A's in it. And if I wasn't interested, forget about it. I had B's and C's, and I had a D in, of all things, typing. So what happened was that because I liked math and I did well in math, my homeroom teacher, the senior English teacher, and the math teacher got together I did not know this for 20-something years, went to the local college and presented my case as a deserving to be admitted, although I had terrible grades and was barely, I was still 16. So they did it. Now, the Korean War was going on, and we had a number of people coming back from the Korean War. This was 1953.
I was gonna say 52, 53, yeah.
Yeah. So here I am, and I'm taking these courses, and they're taking these courses. Some of them haven't been in the classroom for years. Some of them had never had some of the courses that were background for it. I was helping one guy with physics. And I was at his house, and he reached over the shelf and put a little case on the table and says, open that up, read it. It was a Bronze Star, I think it was, and a description of the 24-hour battle using machine guns down to bayonets and fists, that he withstood a Chinese wave after wave attack. Now, and this guy was pretty well shot up. I mean, we had to go to chapel because this was a Presbyterian school. And he was excused to going to chapel because he could not go he couldn't go down a row of seats to get to it. His legs didn't work.
Oh, I see. Yep.
So now here I am. I'm barely 17, and we have all of these guys that one of them was he smoked incessantly. The flame on his cigarette lighter was that high because his hand shook so badly he couldn't hold it still.
Oh my gosh!
He'd been a tanker. So at any rate, that scared the devil out of me. I made the dean's list the second, and I did not look back.
Oh, and if I'm reading, I'm sorry, you're laying it out there pretty well, but just so I'm picking up on this, like just to avoid having to avoid those horrors of reality, jumping into the military.
Well,
like that.
No,
yeah.
it's just yes, it scared the hell out of me.
Yeah, I totally believe. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, holy cow. So, all right, so those are your experiences, sort of, looking backwards. And you've been doing school board work. You've been involved in our local educational process, and sort of, which is, there've been a lot of transitions over even just the past, say, 13, 14 years while you've been doing this. Talk a little bit about kind of where we're at now, in the present compared to where things were in the past, but based on everything else.
Well, I've got to say that I was worked for the school for a year or so as an aide.
Oh, like a substitute teacher?
No. I was a peon. But I was a peon for the gifted student program.
Okay, got it. Like a volunteer of sorts. Yeah.
Yeah, volunteer. Yeah. And in fact, I guess after a while, I actually got paid something. But so I was there in the school every day, and working with the kids, and got to know some of the teachers, not a lot, but they at least recognized me. And I've got to say that you went to school in that school, right? And it was,
yep.
And it had
1980s, yeah, yep.
It had not changed much.
Yeah.
when I was there. So, but I thought the teachers were doing a good job, but the leadership issue. We had some nasty things happen. A principal that never should have been got in. A series of superintendents.
Yes, I remember that period too. Yeah.
That weren't providing much leadership, either for lack of experience or I don't know what else. I wasn't involved. I didn't start getting involved until I think it was Doug. It was the first one that I actually sat down and talked to. But the people were working hard to try to advance. They were trying to take advantage of whatever resources they had. that's about the time frame when I got my reputation. And the answer to the last question, which is school all year.
We'll get to that. I had a feeling that was where I knew you were going to go with this. A very tongue-in-cheek. I was going to ask you if that was your dream for the future, but we'll get there. We'll get there.
But in any event, I got the impression that people are working hard, but there was not we weren't at the top level. I don't think. Now, it's hindsight is a glorious thing.
Well, of course. So yeah. So where are we now? Sort of by comparison to that reality that you stepped into.
Whoa. Day and night.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know that I can take much credit for it, but I was on the board when we hired consultants to come in, and we hired
Lorraine, right?
Which is probably the best thing that I have ever done for education in Henniker.
I would tend to agree with you.
And it was clear to me, right? The two things I will always remember. One is that suddenly everything started appearing in color. And secondly, there was a 5-year plan.
Yeah. there was a plan, which was probably good.
and that I'm sure that there were other we had some turnover in various offices and that sort of thing, but the revolving door stopped. And we started with plans and activities and that were focused on things, and people were getting higher education and special training and that sort of thing. But that was something that was done. Now, it was how long was that? When was that?
That was when we hired Lorraine, you mean?
Yeah.
It was just before I got started with school board. So I'm going to say that was 2010, just about.
All right.
Yeah, I think she went 10 years actually before she retired. So that would have been right. Yeah. Yep. But now this is also very interesting to note, because starting in 2007, I believe that was the advent of the very first smartphone was in 2007, right? So it seems like 14 years isn't maybe that long a period, but let's think about what has changed, not just in our district, but sort of like full scale since then, right? Like technology is like totally different now than it was even then, right?
Let me put a framework on that for you.
Yeah.
There was a big push in school meeting to get the teachers computerized. And $250,000 was approved. And that meant that each teacher had a box with a phone modem and a display and a keyboard. And over half of the faculty did not know how to use them.
Oh my goodness.
Well, we had, and they were supposed to be communicating by email.
Yeah.
Many people had no idea what to do with it.
Right. Wait, and what year was this? This was when you joined school board?
A little after it. No.
Oh my goodness gracious.
Because I was still sitting out in the audience hearing them complain about the.
Oh my goodness gracious. Wow. I didn't realize that. That's wild to hear. Wow. And that was not that long ago, even still. And
so starting there. Now they had because that had been a high school building. Yeah.
Yep. Yes, it was. Yep.
There had been it had been wired for terminals. And so and there was a place that you could put a a the master computer,
Yep, like the mainframe sort of thing.
and it is still there in that same room. It's now air conditioned, but and the kids were taught keyboarding.
Yes, I was one of those kids. It was after it was high school. I was one of those kids. Yeah.
So but now there were people trying to do things. I remember there was for the little ones.
Mm-hmm.
It was a big debate because they had a program
mm-hmm.
that if they misspelled a word,
mm-hmm.
a little bug would go backwards across the top of the screen.
Yeah.
And they found out that the kids were deliberately misspelling the words because they just like to see the bug.
Yeah. Educational unintended consequences. I like that.
so people were working hard to try to understand how all of this happened. And now I'm looking around and everything is integrated. We have this, that.
Well, yeah, I actually want to seize this as a bit of a segue and say, it wasn't just technology that changed. Like, I think when you jumped on school board, this was during sort of the Bush administration and the No Child Left Behind sort of days, right?
Yeah.
Then it transitioned to Every Student Succeeds Act. And at the same time, like the state of New Hampshire was sort of filing its own exclusions from these things. And at the same time, we had the Obamacare. I'm trying the more official name is escaping me at the moment. But the Affordable Care Act, pardon me. All of these major policy changes outside of just technology that have all happened in, over the last 14, 15 years,
Yes.
I know that isn't necessarily, I mean, two of those items are curriculum related items, and one of those is more of like an employment related item, but like, where were we, where are we by comparison to, or in the world of all those things too?
Well, I think that if I look at the most important thing, which is the teachers, we have, I think, a much stronger faculty.
Mm-hmm.
Now, part of that might have to do with the fact that the daughter of the chair of the education department in NEC made sure that we got the best students. Now, I will probably deny
that you've ever said that. That the fix is in.
Well, it certainly was for their practice teaching and so forth.
Yeah.
And so and that was started before, before Lorraine. Mm-hmm. But once Lorraine came, the people who didn't measure up didn't get their contracts renewed.
So what do you think overall, though, like right now, in our district, out of our district, with our teachers, without our teachers, technology being what it is, all the policy stuff that's out there right now, like where do you think we are, the greater we, in this sense, compared to where we've been?
I think that we are struggling to get where we need to be, and that New Hampshire is particularly hampered by the way that we fund things.
I see. So
if you go to some of these places where the state has a much bigger chunk of the educational dollar, you can see some remarkable things.
Yeah.
Now,
I get it. I agree. I mean, this has been you and I wouldn't be the only ones sort of on this thread of there's got to be a better way, right? There's got to be a way that we can, and I'm saying that, in the sort of in the vein of knowing that Henniker has it perhaps better than most in sort of the funding sort of realm because of the way in which we can afford to do it here in town. Some would argue that we can't, but but yeah, talk about some of the other, cities and towns in the state that are struggling with this.
And in the rest of the country, it's
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
and but now that was always with me. I lived in a county seat.
Mhm.
I grew up in a county seat,
Mhm.
so we had reasonable schools,
Mhm.
but there were places where essentially in Texas, you have to have coach,
Mhm.
you have to have football, and by law, you have to have a FFA guy,
Oh,
a
yeah.
farm,
Yeah. Farm
yeah, by
extension.
law.
Yeah.
Everyone had. And now what that means is the coach teaches everything except maybe one course.
Mhm.
Uh,
That's
and
wild. You're kidding me. I didn't realize that's how it works. Wow.
but these are small high schools,
Oh, I get it. No, I'm
with 10
picturing that, but
students.
that's funny. Wow.
I only had one course from a coach. And it was some history thing. I don't know what it was now, but so at any rate, yeah, I think that, but within the context of where we are in New Hampshire and so forth, I feel good about where we are. I wish we didn't have to take so much of the town's resources to make a good school. And I am glad that we have people who go ferociously after the federal dollar as far as grants and things like that are concerned.
Yeah. 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 So I guess that I actually want to sort of like turn the corner a little bit on this and ask, like, where do you suppose then things are going to head in the so let's turn the corner a little bit on this. And I guess what I'm wondering is, like, if where do you think in general we're going to head? So I mean, if talk about New Hampshire, talk about SAU 24. If we look at some of the funding challenges that we have, we look at the growth that we've had since you jumped on the school board. Where are we going in the future? Where do you think, what trajectory are we on? Where do you think things are going to head?
Well, as far as education is concerned, I think that some of the trends that we're dealing with in the I world,
Mm-hmm.
there seems to be this happens. It's happened throughout my adult life,
Mm-hmm.
but it seems like they're trying to get to prepare the kids eventually for citizenship in a world where things are very different than they have been.
Yeah.
And I think that direction is still there. Mm-hmm. And a part of that is people are struggling to understand exactly what role that education plays. Mm-hmm. You hear people talking about jobs that don't require certification, for example, that mm-hmm. sort of thing.
Yeah.
So and it's not a very organized concern as far as I can tell, but that I think is relevance, and it's not so much that if we have this curriculum, the kids are going to make this much money. Mm-hmm. It's more, what kind of citizens are they going to be? And
so I've got a 16-year-old daughter. Okay, right. So she is just on the cusp of looking at college, but potentially college. Okay, right. And right behind her, I have a 15-year-old daughter, and right behind her, we've got an 11-year-old son and daughter. Okay, right. So we are, from your mouth to my ears to my children, right? Okay. Like what would you say to my kids, and sort of like our youngest are in 6th grade right now. Okay. Like, what does the future for them look like? Not just for education, but sort of beyond, like high school, right?
The thing I would say is they are actually, besides getting some knowledge that they need, they are actually learning some very valuable people skills. They're going to need to function with other people as individuals and as groups, and they're going to need the tools to do that. And they're going to run into a system that will look at their grades and their performance, not because what they were learning was important, but how they did it.
That's a very, very wise point. And I guess, okay, I already know the answer to this because we were joking about it earlier. But like, if you were King McElroy for a day and you could like do whatever you wanted in SAU 24, okay, or Superintendent McElroy, because we don't have any monarchies sort of existing here, right?
Well,
what would you do? What's your dream for education, and specifically here in SAU 24?
Well, I'd probably get myself in trouble by appearing before the legislature and explaining to them how they're cheating their kids if they don't change the funding system. But I think that I would, if I were czar, we would have school all around school. That means 4 quarters with a vacation in each one. We would jettison the April nonsense and
I've never heard you refer to it specifically as nonsense, but I like the way you put it.
Well, the French pride themselves on being logical. Everything's got to be Cartesian. And they had a strong background, of religious observations. So they simply sat down and they took the calendar and said, okay, which saint is this weekend? And every month there's a 3-day holiday.
There you go.
That's it. You guaranteed. I had a friend with a Volkswagen when I was working there, and we'd take off. We went to Brittany once. We went to Bourgogne. Just zoom. Any way we could get that BFF. But anyhow, I think that the children, to the degree that, again, we got to realize that they're kids and they've got certain abilities, certain capabilities, that sort of thing. But we ought to make sure that we have them as part of the learning process, and a love of learning, if you like, is something that we install along with the other stuff.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to misattribute this quote, but it's somebody that's like a science communicator out there, like a Neil deGrasse Tyson or somebody to that effect. We're sort of talking about, like, it's amazing how much sort of curiosity and wonder there is, almost sort of like built into or innate in children. And we as a society, and you could argue, I don't know, but I guess you could argue that we sort of run that out of them at some stage or another. And so when you say something like,
you do it, and somebody correctly did do it, but it is also possible to do the teaching without it. We share a school board with an English teacher who did that.
Yes, that's right. I believe that she is next on our list of people to interview because I'm certain that she's got some perspectives on this.
The-
So, oh, sorry,
Go ahead.
continue.
No, you're good.
So I was just going to say, I think, what I agree with you on this basic idea that like, the more time we have students, not just in this sort of stand and deliver sort of like environment with like a teacher at the front of the classroom and they're sitting in a chair and everybody's there to learn. We've sort of talked a little bit about this on your journey. One of the things that I think has been pretty exciting myself, I wonder what you think about this. Since you've been on the board, we've talked about this idea of more experiential learning. We've talked about like all these different routes and differentiation to meet the students where they're at, And so I'm not positive, taking something that you and I were joking about with like just more school in general, like I feel like that's necessary in order to like meet the obligation of meeting every student kind of where they're at. That's not an easy thing to do when you continue to compress the amount of time with
Well,
students. And I wonder if that's where you're coming from.
Well, I'm coming from the present situation doesn't provide for the way people learn and the way people forget.
Yeah, that's a really good statement. I like that. Yeah.
And I believe that if we had a continuum
Mhm.
and we adjusted
Mhm.
the curricula to meet the realities of that,
Mhm.
you want to get some teachers talking, and talk to them about the last week when they're desperately trying to jam in things that they know they should do, but they hadn't been able to get to, sort of thing. That I wouldn't want to see that happen again.
No, I agree with you on that. Yeah. This push. I mean, we've experienced this with the pandemic situation here, right? Like this idea of remote education being. Some people would say, "Oh, it's just as good." Others, I think lots of others would say, "Like, yeah, no, we lost something in that. Like, there was a problem there."
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Look, there are maybe 15-20% of the kids would really excel with that kind of remote thing. But the kids are as much, they're learning together in the classroom environment. And they're learning things that aren't necessarily what the teacher's teaching either, also.
Yeah, I agree.
And I really hate to think about. I'm be honest with you. This is not necessarily considered to be a failing on the part of the SAU, but I don't understand why we don't have a built-in summer remedial section to get the kids back to where they should be before the next one.
Yeah, I've heard, I've heard about a lot of other districts sort of grappling with the same thing, particularly in response to where we're at with COVID. How are we going to do that? And in fact, I think we talked about this maybe the other night too, that like,
we did.
A lot of people are like, well, it's just the great reset, it's like, or the great delay or whatever the heck it is, it's everybody's experienced it. So what's the point in sort of trying to beat that? And I think I agree with where you're coming from. It says like, well, that's a terrible answer. Why don't we work hard to like actually make that up somewhere? Like, yeah.
Now that every time we turn around, hiding behind there is a contract clause.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
One of the advantages of, one of the things that would have to happen for a year-round school is that teachers are full-time employees of the educational institution, SAU for our purposes.
Yeah.
And we have all of the support and professional development and all that other stuff going on all the time. And we wouldn't have a lot of the difficulties we have because of that.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, when we talk about funding in general, right? I mean, it's a I read this book actually. I read this book. I listened to a lot of audiobooks. Somebody else read me this book
Mhm.
a while back, and it's about this sort of idea of unschooling, I think. And I know that's a popularized term. I'm not like, I'm not a fan necessarily of the term, but I'm a very big fan of the idea that, if you look at the educational process, it mimics sort of like this factory mentality of like getting kids through the assembly line and out into the world so that they could be, like products. It's like a weird way of thinking about it.
That was a product.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't actually work that way. We know that now. Like you can't do it that way, right? And so this idea that the factory is only in operation from late August to like late June to early to mid June is a silly idea. And so what could you do? And I mean, this is maybe a more refined version of the question about what's your dream. Like what could you do? What would that look like to you if you had this year-round sort of school presence? What would that look like? How would that work out? How would you imagine that succeeding? Or where would be the things we would need to do in order to get that started,
Well, the first thing we'd have to do is we would have to have a government mandate. And the reason I say that is one of the colleagues on the SAU board,
Mhm.
when I mentioned that in a meeting,
Mhm.
but oh no, we go down to Massachusetts
Yeah, we go on
every
vacation.
April.
Yeah.
You better stop doing that. Oh,
Well, so okay, so I'm with you on this, and I actually wonder, some of the things that we have learned during this pandemic, are we at a place where we might be able to say, good, we're going to do this year round. We're going to do a lot of in-person stuff year round, save for these blocks of time. Maybe it's a week here or a day there, where there is some remote instruction, and so we can still be not present, and maybe we can be traveling and still, going through education asynchronously. Is that a possibility in your mind? Is that a future that we can ever see?
it could be made to work for certain courses.
Yeah.
But I don't know that that I haven't heard things that make me feel that that's a viable option as we stand.
Not yet. Not without a lot more practice, maybe. So
I don't think anybody is saying much nice about remote learning.
I don't think so either. I think you're probably right. I also think that the people that commissioned us to do this are probably regretting the fact that they put two of the most talkative people together to try and figure out how to do this interview. Because I could literally go on with you for like 2 more hours. I am going to circle back with you outside of this whole forum, because I do want to talk with you more about sort of like that whole block of time from like the early 50s all the way through to the time that you got here. That is a very wild journey that I am very interested to learn more about. And you let little bits and pieces of it slip when we've talked about things, your experiences here, your experiences there, your travels in Japan and so forth. I would really love to know a lot more about that. And I think that it's a really remarkable time period, just from a historical standpoint. And I also think that it's a story that not many people think about. We think about all these other, narratives and other things. And I really think your story needs to be told, man. I really do. So we need to do this again and dedicate a lot more time to just that part. Okay.
All right, but do you feel like you've got enough to satisfy?
Yes, absolutely. I really do. I've